Welcome, everybody. We're going to be recording the Real Mushrooms Roundtable 14 this week with special guest Don Ollsin. And Don is a professional herbalist, and he's got over 40 years of experience. And, well, actually, I think it's 50 now, right, Don?
Yeah.
Somewhere in there. 50
A long,
years.
long time.
Long time. And Don is, like I mentioned, a professionally trained herbalist. And he's also a exquisitely trained chef and environmentalist. Tonight he's going to be talking about mushrooms, mushroom digestibility, fungal life cycles, dosing strategies, key mushrooms, and also some of their uses. Don is a pioneering educator, and like he said, he's been in this world for a long, long time, longer than I've been alive. So he's a amazing herbal elder, and he's very passionate, and he's a lifelong learner. He's also the author of a few books, Pathways to Healing, A Guide to Ayurveda, and Dream Body and Shamanism. He has been teaching and creating courses for over 3 decades. His mission is to empower people with the knowledge to heal themselves and others using herbs and holistic healing systems. And I'm sure some of you already know Don, so this intro is just probably some stuff you already know, but welcome to the chat. And I really look forward to listening to Don do his presentation. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Don, and you can just get started at your own pace, okay?
They're going to make me the host?
Yeah, I will do that now. All right. You're in for full control.
Okay, let's. Everybody see the screen?
Just your desktop right now. Oh, yeah, there it comes.
Yeah, it's coming. We're just getting set up, everybody. Okay, let's go. Mason, you just speak. If anything, all I've got is my slideshow in front of me. So if you need any, interrupt me. But otherwise, I'll just start the presentation. So, fantastic fungi project. I'm calling it a project because my interest in mushrooms is varied, and I'll speak about that as I go along. So first and foremost, I want to thank the fungi. They're incredible beings, and I'll share some of that incredibility with you, and you can share some of your incredibility of mushrooms with me. So my project goals are education, educate, not medicate. So I like to think of educate and medicate. So as well as, teaching, having people use these medicinal mushrooms that we're focusing on right now, I like to educate about them as much as I can. So the areas that I'm covering in the project is food. So that includes growing the mushrooms themselves, cooking them. I am a chef, and nourishment. I believe in nourishment first and then treatment second. Ayurveda says, prevention first and then treatment second. So of course, this is not to take away from the medicine aspect. They're incredibly powerful medicines. It's probably it's a big part of the focus, but they're medicines for the earth. They're medicines for the soul. There's beyond the narrow confines of allopathic use of the mushrooms for this or that. They're very complex beings, and they serve us in so many ways, which I'll try to cover as much as I can in this. So also ecology, I have an MA in environmental education and communication. So obviously I'm very interested, as you are, in the health of the earth. So just a few, fascinating tidbits about them. And, this is what we know, but they found fungi growing in the seabed, at the seafloor, and they dated them over 2 billion years old. And there's something, I know it's kind of weird, but there's something I like about the ancestors. Like, these are the ancestors of the planet. They've been here forever. So when we use them, I feel that there are portals through time. I'd like to honor a few people. So first and foremost, I'd like to honor Jeff Chilton. Jeff Chilton is the creator of Namex, which is a huge distribution company for North America that supplies a large portion of the medicinal products available to stores. He started in the 70s like me, and we're friends now. We've been sort of talking over the years, but recently we got a chance to meet and stuff. I like to also Sky Chilton, who's Jeff's son and is a beautiful man, very, very sweet person, and has created the retail end of it and is doing an incredible service with it. And that's what this is called, the Real Mushroom Roundtable. So this is a part of their network. And so I feel privileged to be sharing with you here. Next is our host, Dr. Mason Bressett. I've only known Mason for a little while, but he's an incredibly dedicated human being and way more of a source of knowledge on the medicinal aspects of the mushrooms, the medicinal mushrooms. He writes an awesome newsletter that's worth receiving. And so, yeah, if you decide to sign up for Real Mushrooms, that'd be great. I might offer you an affiliate link, but either way, it doesn't really matter. Bill Chalmers. I just want to go back a little bit in my history. Bill Chalmers was a man in Vancouver who was a mycologist who had, he was kind of one of the real pioneers in that area. And he had a mushroom laboratory. He sold all the supplies that we needed. Anyways, I met him and I organized classes with him with my herbal students, and we went to his facilities, and he taught us especially mainly how to grow the mushrooms. He's since passed away. Dr. Christopher Hobbs, he got his PhD lately, so he's now an official doctor. I'm not sure what his PhD was in. He's an old-time friend. We've been known each other for over 35 years, and he's definitely one of the foremost mushroom experts in North America, and probably on the planet. Up there with Jeff, Paul Stamets, Chris Hobbs. Jeff is a very, very behind-the-scenes man, but extraordinary wealth of knowledge and incredibly, a lot of pioneering work behind the scenes. So again, I think if we know our medicines and we know them a bit more intimately, but I think one of the fascinating things about mushrooms is they're oxygen breathers like us. They're not like plants that don't breathe carbon dioxide. And they have chemicals in their cell walls similar to lobsters and crabs, and they have a very unique protein. So as we'll go through some of the ecological things, but can break down plastics in weeks rather than years. They were used to make mead 9,000 years ago. Who knows if believe in reincarnation, maybe we're drinking mead. I'm a Viking. Maybe I was drinking mead in the longhouse, and over 350 species are consumed as food, including truffles. That's a big rabbit hole. I'll talk about a little bit I know about eating, which is great. So if you didn't know it, some of the plastic car parts are made into use mushrooms. 260 species are thought to be hallucinogenic. Again, we're all familiar with psilocybins, and there's lots and lots of stuff out there now about that. But I would like people to but be aware that Rishi and lion's mane and, other mushrooms we're consuming, they're altering our consciousness too. Maybe not as dramatically as psilocybin, but I'll talk a little bit about Rishi. Bioethanol. I'll talk about leather and building materials. And a DNA study shows there are thousands of different fungi in a simple sample of soil. Dark taxa. Mason, can you get somebody to mute their mic if you can? My professional story started in 1969, and there's a link, or I'll provide a link that goes through my massive list of teachers that I've studied with. So I put this in relationship to the earlier slide. I have so many teachers that I would like to honor, but for the brevity for this one, I'm sticking with these particular people. I'm definitely a pioneer. I started in 1969, and that was just getting started. If anyone here's from Vancouver or has lived there, I worked at a place called the Golden Lotus Restaurant on 4th Avenue, and out of that business came 3 businesses. Well, 2 directly. The Nom Cafe on 4th Avenue was started by 2 of my friends who were also working at the Golden Lotus, Nom and Vern, and Banyan Books. Banyan Books was started by Colin Limworth. So, and Colin's still a friend. Robin was for a long time, but he's moved away. But I take a systems approach to healing. So it was the way I was taught. And so in 1970, Dr. John Christopher did an iridology reading for my wife at the time and myself. And when he looked in my wife's eyes, he used a loop and a magnifying glass, and he looked in her eyes and he sat back and he said, "Did you ever work with radioactive isotopes?" She said, "Yeah, I worked with them for 10 years." And she was 10 years older than me. And there was before they were using lead protection. So yeah. And, she died of cancer fairly young, in her 50s, and it was spread throughout her whole body. So that was amazing. And then for myself, he said, looked at my eyes and said, "Oh, you were a forceps delivery." I went, "Okay," news to me. Anyways, went home and asked Mom, and sure enough, I was born on New Year's Eve at 5:20 p.m. And I think possibly the doctors wanted to get to the party. So I've had a little bit of a axe to grind with the medical profession right from the start. But I see this, that in iridology, we were taught to read the whole eye, and the whole eye had everything in it, from the brain to the feet and all the organs. And so we wouldn't just, here's this for the liver. We'd be like, okay, let's put together a picture of this person and what are the weaknesses, what are the strengths. There was a constitutional aspect to it, more simple than Ayurveda, but you definitely see if it was a strong person or a weak person. There was lots of variants that you could put into that. So I only bring that up. It's that I appreciate this for that, but at the same time, I feel that true healing is a complex thing, and the more we can work on the whole system, the better. And this is especially for the real mushrooms practitioners and the students that are here. Some of my students, some people I've probably not met. And next is systematically I met Dr. Robbie Svoboda in 1986. So then I got into Ayurveda, and I'll talk a little bit about, very briefly, about the doshas and the mushrooms. And also then in 2013, I graduated with my MA in Environmental Education and Communication. And I mentioned that because one of my favorite subjects was systems. And I went on from then to totally, completely immerse myself in systems, even taking a course with Fritjof Capra, who's like, one of the foremost systems people on the planet. We had his book as one of our textbooks. Metastates, just skip that. Well, there's a metastate. The food is your medicine. We dig our grave with our fork. A metastate is how you frame things. As a teacher now, as I move forward into this 2022 decade or year, maybe it'll be a decade, but we all know we've been through a major amount. And so what I've learned and come to appreciate are my connections with people, my deep connections. I'm, honestly, at this stage in my life, I'm not interested in sustaining unhealthy relationships. But I changed my metaphor, my life metaphor, my work metaphor to one of mycelium. So I'm allowing my mycelium to regrow. And I had an apprenticeship program and a community in 2019. In 2020, I got hit by everything that happened. And so I'm just now in the process of rebuilding my community. And, part of that is my work with real mushrooms and Mason and Sky and Jeff. So again, metastate, I teach to learn, I share to learn. And again, I said earlier, educate, not medicate. So fantastic fungi course. I said I would give you small plugs for it, but it's self-study. It's made up of short 5 to 10 minutes lessons with relevant tools and templates. Total watch time of all the videos is about 90 minutes. It's digestible and practical. We suffer from too much information now. So this is not to replace the work that Dr. Mason's doing, or Dr. Mason's doing, Dr. Bressett, or anybody else, but it's like even just one newsletter is enough to go, oh my God, I'll talk about that when I come to beta-glucans. So it's relatively digestible, and it's also practical, like get growing these mushrooms, get tuning into them, get using them, and then learn, don't wait, get enough information and, feel comfortable. I feel comfortable with everything I'm sharing because I'm not just relying on myself, I'm relying on people like Jeff. And so there's a ton, and Mason, so there's a ton of research behind it. Okay, so let's go to the fungal life cycle. That's again covered in detail in the video. And I think it's really important that people know this thing about the fungal life cycle, because there's been a lot of confusion this last couple of years between the fungi, the mushroom, the fruiting body, and the mycelium. And so this is where most of the research has been done on the use of mushrooms for medicine. This is also the primary place that we use the mushrooms, the fungi, for eating. But interestingly enough, and I'll talk a little bit about it, the mycelium is where we use a lot of it for ecology. And I will say on the food level, culturally, the mycelium have been used to make food more digestible. So that digestibility factor is first and foremost, mushrooms have the power to turn wood into food and turn rot into life. And so that's one of the things they're digesting and transmuting everywhere. They have a symbiotic relationship with the trees. The trees, mushrooms facilitate the absorption of nutrients and will spread the mycelium, long ways away from the tree and find something it needs and transport it to the tree. So there's actually mycologists who work for the forest department in our province, and a big part of that is to them to keep in track with the mycelium. But at the food level, some of you probably eat tempeh or miso. I eat miso a lot. I eat tempeh sometimes. A kefir is a fungus. I use kefir a lot. And the last one's called natto, and it's a big source of nattokinase, which is an alternative to aspirin for blood thinning. So you can go to any Japanese store and you can get natto. It's kind of, I hate to say that, I could eat a lot of things. It takes a bit of getting used to the flavor. I'm not quite mastered that. I play, again, why study with Don? If you're just interested purely in the medicinal aspects, probably, you still get a lot from me because I have a practical experience with that. So it's, I'm going to give you how you could really use it in your practice. But my power is in that I've tried so many of these things. I've done them. I've grown the mushrooms. I even looked extensively into a commercial enterprise of mushroom growing, went around to a lot of farms and stuff like that. So, and I also try everything. So I went and got natto, and then it was growing on soybeans, but I wanted garbanzo beans because I thought they were more nutritious and what I needed. So I grew my own natto. I researched and I grew my own natto. So I've done a lot of and I've failed a lot. I mean, that's also good news for you. Okay, so the mycelium, as I said, I go into a lot more detail of the stages in the course, but the mycelium are used a lot now to make products. That's another factor, aside from being digestible. They do make a few medicinal products out of mycelium, but most, like I said, 90% are probably from the fruiting body. And anyways, that's a big debate I don't want to get into. Mycelium coffins. Yes. So these are made in Denmark, I think, and they're grown in a week. And after you put it into the ground, the coffin will sprout and grow mushrooms. And they actually use mushrooms from the forest to cultivate the mycelium. So such a beautiful, intimate relationship. This is a very toxic industry, coffins and stuff. So all of you are ecologically minded, this is one of the options that we have. Mycelium furniture. And you can kind of see the chair back here. There's a fascinating video that I share in my course that is do-it-yourself chair making. You can make a chair yourself out of mycelium. You would need lots of space and be able to grow a lot of mycelium, but you could do it. Like you'd have to get a big box that deep freeze comes in or something, and then you make the mold and then you pour the mushroom in. But people are doing it now. They're making mushroom furniture, mycelium furniture, leather. This is, leather made mycelium. Again, traditional leather is very, very toxic to the environment and not very sustainable. So I'm going to follow these trends as they grow. I've already been in touch with the people who make the coffins, not the furniture people, but I will. That's part of, I call this a project, not the course is just part of the project. The bigger project is to continue to upgrade and update the phenomenal amount of knowledge that's coming to us at all the time, every day. Beta-glucans. I said I'd come back to this with before as the research goes. So I called Jeff and I said, okay, I want to know about beta-glucans. I mean, I know what beta-glucans are, but I want to know, deeper. I want to teach this course, so I want to, be able to communicate it. So what does Jeff do? He sends me 6 intense research papers on beta-glucans, and those are the best 6. Like he had many more. So I dug into them, and next day I phoned Jeff. Okay, Jeff, tell me, what are beta-glucans? What's the short story on this? And the very short story is messenger molecule. That's what the beta-glucans are. They're a polysaccharide that, I believe it's a polysaccharide that goes into the bloodstream, and some are digested immediately from the mushrooms, others are post-digested after we break down the fiber that's in them. There's a lot of scientific jargon, but basically these messenger molecules tie into receptor sites. The main receptor sites are in the immune system. So if nothing else, just know that even if it's button mushrooms, the one you buy in the supermarket, they are stimulating, I don't like stimulating, modulating your immune system. And again, there's a paper I have on the issue that we're facing right now about one's paradigm's way of working with the immune system and my paradigm of working with the immune system, and most people here, the natural method. And these are extremely effective in activating, not stimulating, activating, waking up. Hello. Is anybody out there? In terms of, something that shouldn't be there, and then the immune system. Yeah. And it's a relational system. It's not an army. It's a relationship, and it has many different communication molecules in it. But one of them is more like a bouncer, and so. But the bouncer's not going to come and jump on something right away. It's going to talk to it a little bit and see if it's, a renegade cell or not, like cancer. And if it is, turns out it'll then eat that like a macrophage. Again, more details and more research as we go. Okay, so the fungal life cycle is what I mentioned. Then the herbs that I kind of made this, I was trying to put this slideshow together because last time we worked off a doc and it didn't work as well. But immune support, so the first 2 that, the mushrooms that I have the longest relationship are Rishi and turkey tail. I have the longest relationship with, and I have a personal relationship with them. I've harvested them in the wild. I've grown them, and I've made medicine. I've taught them. I've had artists draw pictures for me on the Rishi and the turkey tails. So longevity, I feel if you're just starting out studying mushrooms, I'm still really partial to Rishi. It has the longest research on it, and it has the most across the board. So to me, it's like the ultimate adaptation. Plus, in Ayurveda medicine, it's in the 9 mushrooms I cover, it's the most bitter by far. And bitter is really important for inflammation, for pitta, for the fire. So when you're suffering from fire, and a lot of our challenges with this COVID, challenges that we get inflamed. So I feel like Rishi is one of the most powerful anti-inflammatories. Turkey tails are, used extensively in Japan for cancer. Oyster, good for the heart. I'm going to speak to these a little bit later on. Oyster in the heart, garden giants for the earth restoration, Shiitake for circulation, lion's mane for cognition. I've fallen in love with lion's mane since, the fact that Real Mushrooms has made these available, easy to get. And so I really started using lion's mane. Actually, Sky had sent me a couple just sample packages of them and 20 grams. And maybe 3 of them, and I tried them, and I used a lot of things in my life, and I really feel like I noticed a difference. In fact, as I just received my shipment yesterday or the day before, and I started using lion's mane again, and it really has an impact. And when I did some research, I'd see people saying, "Oh, this saved my life." There's a lot of brain fog. This is a lot to process, what we're going through. So a lot of people are suffering brain fog, and I think it's important to, keep our brain as healthy as we can. I think it's really important to not allow censorship of your thinking. Find places where you're not censored in your speaking, in your sharing, because that's really dangerous. You need to be able to think for yourself. You need to be able to think clearly, and you need to be able to communicate with other people, different points of view. That's just necessary. Mycelium. Let's go back up because I think I did, this is when I was making this slideshow, how's our time? Okay, yeah, which is about perfect. We'll do Q&A. So I talked about the Rishi. It's a conch, and so is turkey tail. So they're not edible. They're indigestible. They're not poisonous. There are no poisonous conchs. That's one thing that's wonderful when you're looking out into the forest and you want to harvest. Turkey tails you can chew, some people call it the forest chewing gum, and it's just chewy and you suck the juice out of it, and they're not bitter at all. They're quite almost bland. Oysters. Okay, oysters, the biggest thing I want you to take from here, if you don't, if you don't pursue any further with me, grow oyster mushrooms. They are so forgiving. They're the most forgiving mushroom that you can do, and they are delicious. Then they come in all colors, yellow and blue and white, different sizes, and so I grow them on coffee grounds, and I've had extreme success with them, but I don't sterilize the coffee grounds. I've grown wood chips, just taking hardwood pellets and putting water in them and bran, and then creating a medium to grow them. And I'll maybe slip over to my, we'll see. I don't want to get into the technology thing, but grow oyster mushrooms. Just try them. They're so forgiving, and so you don't need to sterilize everything. It's good. I have an alcohol thing and I have gloves, so I'll spray things with alcohol, but I won't cook them in pressure cookers or any of that kind of stuff with oysters. Oysters can also be grown in your garden like the garden giants. So the 3 we have here is the oyster, the garden giants, and the shiitake. And again, in my course, I have a link to a video that teaches you how to do all 3s. And literally, I'm growing these right now. The garden giants, I've done earth restoration. One of my students, Mark Wilkes, he got a contract years ago up in the Sunshine Coast to rehabilitate soil on a mine. and he put in these fungi gardens, and this dead, inactive soil within 2 years was a total thriving community of plants, insects, and animals. And so that was a personal experience. Leela Darwish has Earth Repair. She's also another friend who does this on big scale, working with mushrooms to clean up toxic wastes. So oyster, garden giants, and shiitake can all be grown in your garden too. I'm going to play more with oysters when I get back to having some land. I'm growing them in my apartment now, a lot of them. And the garden giants, like I said, I've done them myself. I don't find them to be delectable. They're edible and they're not terrible, but they're not as delicious as the oyster or the shiitake. And so the shiitake can be grown on logs. Mushrooms are fussy. And so one of the things that I talk about in the course is the humidity tent. So they're easy to grow, but fussy to grow. So I really had trouble growing shiitake in the city of Victoria. And I did everything right with the logs and stuff like that. Just couldn't get them to grow. So I gave them to my daughter, who had a cabin up in the Shawnee Lake area, very moist, very wet, lots of mushrooms. That's where we go to pick mushrooms. And I said, here, get rid of these. And so she took them up there and threw them in the forest just to get rid of them. Of course, went back 6 months later and they were sprouting shiitake. So they're really tuned into the ambient. They're and like I have radiant heat where I am now. And so I successfully grew a big patch of oysters, but the next one's kind of dried up, and we went through a cold spell and the heater was on a lot. So you just have to play with them. And there's I think it's called Mela, and I'll put a link to that in the course, is that Mela is this incredible scientific thing but it's about $500, but it does everything and it computerizes everything. So you grow the mushrooms very successfully. So food should be your medicine. So so I eat oysters a lot. I eat shiitakes. I had oyster shiitake frittata for breakfast yesterday. Shared it with my partner. Lion's mane. Oh my God. I haven't mastered growing this yet, but I'm going to. It's one of my missions. Freaking delicious, yummy. And like I said earlier, it's one of the ones. So again, part of my project is you can buy these extracts and you can even buy them in bulk. You could email me if you're interested in that. And I was a chef, and so these four, my lion's mane, maitake, oyster, and shiitake, you can get as organic powder that are concentrated, so you can make soups, you can make roux, you can make, I cook them in rice, which is a very traditional Chinese medicine way of using herbs, is you cook them right in the rice. So I find mushrooms sometimes make me a little bit laxative because I'm pitta and my bowel process is fairly loose. I'm not a vata where it's tight or a kapha where it's slow. So if I take too much mushrooms, that upsets my regularity, and not a good way, and not a bad, and not constipated. But what I do is I put 2 teaspoons per, like when we talked last time, Mason mentioned that cordyceps you can use more of them. Somebody asked a question and they said they're really good for energy. So right now I have bulk maitake and bulk cordyceps. So I had a kilo of each. So I put 6 teaspoons No, I think I'm getting, I want 2 teaspoons. I'm playing with 6 to 12 teaspoons per cup of water. Okay, let's get back up so you can have a formula that you can transfer. So I use brown rice. So you have brown rice, you have 2 cups of water. So into the 2 cups of water, I stir in or mix in 2 teaspoons, 2 good healthy teaspoons of Cordyceps and 1 teaspoon of Mycelium. Can play with these. These are edible. I need to make some more. I just finished I make enough for the week usually, and I just eat a bowl a day or so. But you can play with it for flavor and for, how it's going with your body. So again, cordyceps are, again, an interesting flavor, not a bad one, but not as delicious. So back to my take, just about finished here. But if you have a Japanese store in your area, you can usually get fresh maitake, organic, and another super delicious mushroom, really good. And again, I've got some maitake, hasn't fruited yet, but I got some mycelium, and I'm trying to see if I can get to grow that. But if not, I can get that really easily at the Japanese store. You could pick up some natto when you're there too. So cordyceps, as I said, you can do, Real Mushrooms has a ton of research on their site. And I'm not sure you can ask Mason what you need to do to join the practitioner group, but they have a substantial discount for practitioners, so they can pass on their mushrooms to their clients and still make some money from it. So chaga, I asked Mason the last time why they chose digest for chaga, and he said because that's where all the research, a lot of the research was done on chaga. So I'm going to end with the last slide. So I'd like to thank the fungi. I do believe we're in communication with nature. I do believe there are sentient beings. I have taken classes and we've all tuned into turkey tails, and like 20 of us lying around a log, tuning into it, doing attunement, amazing feedback from the fungi. And I also did it with Rishi at the class. I do it myself all the time. I'd like to thank you for coming and I appreciate a lot. This is something that Mason and I had to do for a makeup class for Real Mushrooms. And I wanted to be talking to people, and I noticed some people I know there, and it's really easier for me to speak to you because I know who I'm speaking to. So I'd like to thank Mason for hosting it and for allowing us to reshoot this, because we had every technological nightmare you'd hope for in the first one. And I'd like to thank Real Mushrooms, which includes Namix and Jeff Chilton. So that's the show.
Thanks, Don. That was great. Does anybody have any questions? We got we got some time here to debrief, and so I'll just leave it up to the floor, and if anybody wants to just say hi or ask a question to Don, we'll get ready.
Yeah, it could be more like a discussion too. Like it doesn't, it could be a very broad question, that's what I love about being together. And this is, I'm going to do some live classes this year, but many of my classes are online now. So I've learned that it's really, we're connected, even though we're in the virtual world,
Can I share a thought? It's Linda speaking.
Totally, yeah, of course.
Something that just popped into my mind. I haven't used a lot of commercial mushroom in my practice, and I haven't, other than foods, and they're just kind of a yummy. My favorite is morels.
Yeah, no kidding, yeah.
But I just started thinking, when you're scooping, and there's a lot of encouragement to add it to your cup of hot water of cocoa or something I heard about with the use of honey, because honey over the years, when we discovered a honey hive, and it was very dangerous for people to entice or get the honey. So it was always said that it was something to be revered and sacred, as only a small amount is what you use of this honey because of the difficulty in getting it. And I'm just wondering if that foraging for mushrooms, I mean, sure, we don't want to disturb the nest, as I'm going to call it.
Good point. Yeah. The mycelium. Yeah.
Yep. So you don't want to take a lot. So where does that really fit in with the quantity we're meant to take?
Well, for one thing, Jeff grows them all in greenhouses, and they're totally sustainable. So except for chaga, and even that is from a forest that's sustainable. So that's the first thing. And it's always an issue when you're speaking to a volume. So, but as far as it's the fruiting body. It's like a picking an apple. You're not going to do anything to the tree because you picked an apple. So the fruiting bodies, like the mycelium, yeah, if we were harvesting the mycelium, then we'd be totally. But having said that, it's still, most mushroom pickers I know, they respect the way they pick the mushrooms so they don't disturb the mycelium. But again, they're very hardy and very forgiving. Like.
Mhm.
The grow in the wild side. I wouldn't worry about that. And as far as honey goes, yeah, I think that as an herbalist, personally, if you can taste the mushrooms, that's the best. Like anytime you add a taste to something, you change its Ayurvedic properties. So and so ideally,
my question was to you was, how do you feel about consuming a large amount of this type of substance, or is it meant to just be something we supplement?
a really good question. We're kind of an experiment. I'll let Mason put his 2 cents in, but or $5 or whatever. But I feel like we need them so badly. Like they are the ultimate immune modulators, immune activators, and our immune systems are being taxed to the max by, I'll say it, all the bullshit that's going on, like masks and social distancing. Our immune system is based on love and connection, and and Ayurveda, they personify her, and they call her ahamkara. And when ahamkara is happy, your immune system is thriving. So the fact that the powers that be are trying to make us so unhappy is like, our job is to stay happy.
Yeah.
So I think, first of all, these mushrooms we use real mushrooms. They're highly sustainable. They're done with total integrity. So the volume, so that part's taken care of. How much we should eat, that's a, and again, what I learned over my years of studying, there's a fancy thing in the intestines called the Peyer's patch. It's kind of a little computer program that you need to eat something. Like when I studied with seaweeds with Brian Drum, most people, if they're not Japanese or not from a culture that eat seaweeds, they have to eat them for a month before they'll start to really digest them. So I know, Mason, you can speak to that. So consuming, I think, nourishment, I think especially most of the ones I've covered, but I'd say like Mycelium and oyster that are eaten in abundance. We eat button mushrooms already. Even Shiitake, they're all fairly consumed. So I would say you're okay with that. And listen to your body too.
Yes,
Like my body
absolutely.
tells me when I'm using too much of the ones that are laxative, lets me know in uncertain terms.
Absolutely.
Mason, do you want us to speak to that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Linda. I think I don't think they're for everybody, and dose and frequency is really important, but they are food first, and these are extracts. We have to take that into effect too. So we are getting a more potent form of the mushroom than you would find in nature. Um, I think that cycling things is always good, just to for our own body's sake, in terms of it kind of finding that kind of allostasis set point. It's usually one step ahead of us. So I think that depending on you're probably pretty familiar with the immune system and all the specifics that comes down to that, and we still are learning more. So I think that keeping an eye on how people are responding to these things as a practitioner, or a someone using them for themselves, even if that's just a little bit more learning depending on where they're at. I think that keeping an eye on some of things like that, like some general signs of immune activation, digestion is usually a good thing to keep track of with these things, and that will keep you kind of somewhat on course. But yeah, you bring up a good point, and I don't think we should be um, over consuming these, but because of their their high safety profile and their um, relatively safe for most people, but they do cause reactions for some people. I've seen it, and just depends on how their individual biochemistry reacts. But hopefully that helps a little bit. But I'm open to kind of discuss this more, because it's a good question.
I have one other thing to put in there. Of course, in Ayurveda, your three constitutional types. So your pit is going to be have the most ability to digest them and process them, just because they have high fire, and that's hydrochloric acid. That's the ability to break things down, and they fit the model of 3 times a day. For example, you don't have to do that, but they fit that model of most suggested dosages fit the pitta. Whereas the vata, and as I mentioned, the Rishi, which is bitter, is really, really good for bringing the pitta into balance. So, and then you also want to watch constitutionally, not too much bitter for the vatas, because that disturbs their dosha over time. But having said that, something like lion's mane, which is very tasty and delicious, would be and really good for the nervous system, really good for the brain, would really be good for the vata, because they're the nervous system people, the brain people, and in Ayurveda they're hummingbirds, so they take smaller sips throughout the day. So if you were
Yes.
experimenting, then you could give the vata smaller dosages, and they work better with smaller dosages. And of course, kapha is the earth water. It's a really slow moving. So they would take longer to process. It takes longer for them to metabolize them. So then you could use, I'm really speaking to the practitioners here, but also to anybody that's personally using them. Once you know your dosha, then you can make sure you don't imbalance your dosha over time. But you use, again, Rishi would really be good for kaphas, because they're also do well with the bitter flavor. But that's the only one I could, all of them are good. This is just a refinement, this is just refinement on them. Is that good, Linda?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Don. And I wondered if you could comment on cordyceps being difficult to come off of when people have been using it regularly as an adaptogen for stress. Have you come across that at all?
I'll put that one on the Mason. No, I haven't had enough people using cordyceps, but he's more in a bigger circle of people using this mushrooms that way. So
Yeah, Linda, cordyceps very warming, very stimulating in Chinese medicine. So you know, if you have those patients that have been using it for a while, their body, you know, might be using it as, you know, some people use coffee or some people use stimulants to kind of give them that false energy. So yeah, it can be probably, or I can say for sure, it's probably not indicated for, you know, those third stage adrenally fatigued people, maybe chronic fatigue, maybe fibromyalgia, um, that don't have that baseline of adrenal function down, because they will just be sort of using it, you know, to propel them forward with energy that's not theirs. Whereas, you know, if they took it and then they use that energy just to kind of rest, those are two different scenarios, right? But I think a lot of those people just end up kind of spinning their wheels again and using that little bit of energy they get, and then it's just this vicious cycle. So yeah, you got to be careful with those kind of patients I've seen. But you know, it comes down to dose again, and also what else is going on for them. But you know, there can be dependence with anything. They say it's more like hormone, like regulatory, you know, it's not as strong as like a adrenal extract, or, you know, an adrenal glandular, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But it is one of the more stronger adaptogens.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, with just trying to get the word here. It's in my course, I do like a 12-minute video on Rishi because it's like has the most research. But one of the things I was called the Shaman's mushroom, and I'm looking to the side so I can get the video, or I got my document open. Call it the Shaman fungus, but it has a thing called Wakey. How do you say that? Wakey. It's like protective energy. It's so I feel like it's something that you can use fairly regularly and not get dependent on, because it's like bringing up your spirit energy. And I find Rishi like that. It was used a lot for meditation. They used to, there was a current that they come from China or Japan to the forests of BC, and they would come here in 200 BC and live in our forests and harvest our Rishi, just move here and meditate and be hermits in our forests, because they could get a Rishi where you couldn't get it in China before it was grown commercially. It was mostly only for the royalty and not for the common people. So the monks would come here. So I feel like it's a really good herb that balances out what you were just saying with the Cordyceps, is much more grounding and keeping you in your own natural energy. Anyways, I think we'll call it any final, just anything, but it is time to end.
No, you got to tell us more about your course.
Oh, yes, it's the Fantastic Fungi Micro course. I call it micro, but I'm just trying to get down to digestibility for knowledge. So there's like 12 videos on it, and they're short videos, and they cover 9 mushrooms, 9 of the ones I went through in this slideshow, and cover beta-glucans that cover the life cycle of the mushroom and go into more details about the mycelium and the different properties of the mushroom, of the fungi themselves. And
Is it still available at a discounted rate? I missed out on that.
yeah, I was trying to think of, I have to put a code in. So just for fun, we'll put real mushrooms in now, but give me I'll have to put that code in. So you can use Dawn's mushrooms or Dawn mushroom. I just want to make some association to myself too. So Fungi Dawn. Something, yeah, Fungi Dawn. That sounds good. Yeah, FUNGIDON. I'll put that as a passcode for now. And you'll get 50% off.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I want to get this knowledge out, and that's what Mason is helping me do is just get this out, because like I said, this is the fantastic fungi project. It's, there's one thing about using them, just using the extracts for medicine, but that's just one aspect of fungi, a very important aspect. But there's all these other wonderful things about fungi. So thank you. We have a term in the Pacific Northwest that they use Coast Salish called Haishka. It's their way of saying goodbye. And so I say Haishka. And I like to stay on with Mason until everybody leaves. So we'll let you exit without jetting, and if you do have something you do want to say briefly before you exit,